The moment I unlocked the front door of my grandmother's condo and heard strangers laughing inside, I knew exactly what my brother had done. I didn't panic, I didn't cry, I stood in the hallway with my key still in my hand, and I thought, I have every single bank record going back 14 months, every e-transfer, every text message, every email he sent to the tenant posing as the property manager. I had built a paper trail so clean you could eat off it. He just didn't know that yet. Let me back up, because this didn't start at the front door. It started the day my grandmother, Edith, passed away in her sleep at her condo in Kitchener, Ontario. She was 81. She left behind a one-bedroom unit on the 8th floor, fully paid off, assessed at just under $400,000, and a handwritten will that was clear as glass. The condo went to me. Not to my brother, not to my parents, to me, because I was the one who drove 40 minutes every Sunday to bring her groceries, who sat with her through 3 rounds of physio after her hip replacement, who called her every Wednesday night without fail for 11 years. My grandmother knew exactly what she was doing when she wrote that will. My brother. I'll call him my brother, because that's what he is, biologically, even if the word feels wrong lately. He showed up at the funeral in a blazer he'd ironed, shook hands with the lawyer, and smiled through the whole reading like he already knew the outcome. When the lawyer confirmed that the condo was mine, his smile didn't move. He just nodded, once, like he was filing the information away. That should have told me everything. The estate took about 3 months to fully transfer. I was doing the paperwork, dealing with the title, updating the insurance. I was also working full-time as an accounts payable specialist at a logistics company in Waterloo, which meant my days were already 12 hours of spreadsheets and invoice reconciliation. I didn't have time to think too hard about what my brother was doing with his days. He'd been between jobs for most of the previous year. He had a girlfriend, Sasha, who I'd met maybe 4 times. They lived in a basement apartment in Cambridge, and things were, according to my mother, a bit tight right now. My mother said it the way she always said things about him. Gently, with her head tilted slightly like she was introducing a fragile object she needed me to handle carefully. I heard it. I just didn't act on it fast enough. About 6 weeks after the title transferred into my name, I drove out to the condo on a Saturday morning to start sorting through what was left of my grandmother's belongings. I had a key. I had every right to be there. I rode the elevator to the 8th floor, knocked out of habit, and when nobody answered, I unlocked the door. The condo smelled like someone else. Someone else's coffee, someone else's candles, someone else's laundry detergent. There was a jacket on the hook by the door that didn't belong to me or my grandmother. There was a pair of men's sneakers near the mat. There was a bowl of fruit on the kitchen counter that hadn't been there 3 weeks ago when I'd done a walkthrough. I didn't go further into the unit. I stepped back into the hallway, pulled the door shut and stood there for a minute. Then I called my brother. He answered on the 3rd ring, voice relaxed. "Hey. There's someone living in the condo," I said. A pause. "Oh yeah, I was going to mention that. I found a tenant. I figured since it was sitting empty we might as well get some income coming in." I asked him what he meant by we. He said, "Come on. You know what I mean. It's a family asset." I hung up. I want to be really clear about something. I am not a confrontational person by nature. I have spent most of my adult life being the one who smooths things over, who lets things go, who absorbs conflicts so the people around me don't have to. My therapist and I have had many conversations about exactly this tendency. So when I tell you that in the parking lot of my grandmother's building, sitting in my car, I made a decision that I was not going to smooth this one over, I need you to understand how much weight that decision carried. I called my property insurance broker first. Then I called a paralegal I'd been referred to by a colleague. Then I drove home and opened my laptop. Because here is what my brother did not know about me. I spend 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, looking at financial records and finding things that don't match. I know what a paper trail looks like. I know how to build one, and I know how to read one that someone else built badly. And my brother, it turned out, had built a very bad one. Over the next 3 weeks, I documented everything. The tenant had found the listing on Kijiji. My brother had posted it using a fake property management name, Westmount Residential Group, which does not exist, and had signed the lease as property manager with a signature that was, generously, an approximation of mine. The monthly rent was $1,850. The tenant had paid first and last month up front, by e-transfer, directly to an account my brother had opened at a different bank than his regular one. 14 months of rent, 2 months up front. I did the math. He had collected over $29,000 from a property he did not own. I printed everything. The Kijiji listing, which I screenshot before he could delete it. The lease, which the tenant was kind enough to share with me once I explained the situation calmly, and showed her the title documents proving I was the actual owner. The e-transfer records, which showed the account number, which I traced through the bank. The phone records showing calls between my brother and the tenant's number from his personal cell. I put it all in a manila folder. Then I put the manila folder in a larger accordion file. Then I labeled the accordion file with a date and a case number I made up myself, because I find it helps me think clearly when things are organized. My parents found out somewhere in the middle of all this. My mother called me on a Tuesday evening, and I could tell from the first syllable that my brother had gotten to her first. He said, "You're trying to take the condo away from the family," she said. I asked her what that meant, since the condo legally belonged to me. He said Grandma wasn't thinking clearly when she made the will. He said she always favored you and it wasn't fair. I let her finish. Then I said, "Mom, he's been collecting rent on a property he doesn't own for over a year, under a fake company name, with a forged signature." There was a long pause. He said you were going to exaggerate. I didn't argue. I said I'll let the documents do the talking, and I got off the phone. This is the part people don't understand about situations like this. It's never just the person who does the thing. There's always an ecosystem around them, people who know something is wrong but need to believe a more comfortable story. My mother wasn't a bad person. She just loved her son in a way that made it very hard for her to see him clearly. I understood that. I had spent 31 years being shaped by the same dynamic. But understanding it didn't mean I was going to set my legal rights on fire to make her more comfortable. My brother called me 4 days later. He had apparently consulted someone, a friend, not a lawyer, which became obvious very quickly, and arrived at the conclusion that he had some kind of claim to the property through unjust enrichment, which is a real legal concept that he was applying completely incorrectly. "I put work into finding that tenant," he said. "I manage the property. I have a right to compensation. For managing a property you listed without my knowledge or consent, using a forged signature on a fraudulent lease under a fake company name," I said. He went quiet for a moment. "You sound like you've been talking to a lawyer," he said. "I've been talking to a paralegal," I said. "I'll be talking to a lawyer next week." He tried a different approach then. He said he was struggling. He said things with Sasha were hard. He said he was embarrassed, and he should have asked me first, and he was sorry. And I could hear it. He was genuinely sorry. But sorry and accountable are two different things, and I had learned that lesson slowly over many years. "I need you to repay what you collected," I said, "and we need to formalize the tenancy properly under my name with a real lease." He said he didn't have $29,000. I said I knew that. And I told him I was willing to work out a repayment plan through a written agreement with the paralegal involved if he wanted to avoid this going further. I gave him 1 week to decide. He spent that week apparently trying to convince my parents to pressure me into dropping the whole thing. My mother called me twice. My father, who rarely weighed in on anything, sent me a text that said simply, "Can't you let this go for the sake of the family?" No question mark. Just a statement, dressed up as a request. I thought about that text for a long time. I thought about all the things I had let go over the years, the borrowed money never repaid, the times I covered for him, the Sunday dinners where I sat quietly while my parents made excuses for choices that had consequences for other people. I thought about my grandmother, who had trusted me with something, and what it would mean to walk away from it. I replied to my father, "I love you. I'm not letting this go." On the 7th day, my brother called and said he wasn't going to sign anything. So I filed a civil claim. The process in Ontario is not fast, but it is thorough. I filed through the Superior Court. My paralegal had referred me to a real estate litigation lawyer by then, and we submitted the claim together. Recovery of rental income, compensation for fraudulent misrepresentation, and damages related to the unauthorized use of my property. We also filed a complaint with the local authorities regarding the forged signature on the lease, which is a separate matter and still working its way through. The tenant, for her part, was wonderful. She was a woman in her late 50s, a retired teacher named, well, I won't use her name, who had no idea any of this was going on. She'd been living there in good faith, paying rent on time, taking care of the place. When I explained everything, she was mortified. She cooperated with my lawyer fully. She'd kept every receipt, every e-transfer confirmation, every text message from my brother. She even had a voicemail of him using the fake company name. My brother hired a lawyer eventually. The lawyer sent a letter suggesting that my grandmother's will should be contested on grounds of diminished capacity. This is a legal strategy that requires actual evidence of diminished capacity, which there was none of, because my grandmother had been assessed by her own physician less than 4 months before her death and found to be fully cognitively intact. The will challenge went nowhere. The civil claim is what mattered. My lawyer was patient and systematic, which I appreciated. We presented the title documents, the Kijiji listing, the fraudulent lease, the e-transfer records, the fake company registration that didn't exist, the voicemail. My brother sat across a mediation table from me in March, and he looked like a person who had finally run out of road. His lawyer had presumably explained to him by then that the evidence was not something you could argue around. You can contest intentions, you can question motives. You cannot contest a bank record. The mediation resulted in a structured repayment agreement. He would repay me the full amount collected over 24 months with interest. He would sign a formal acknowledgement that the condo belongs solely to me. He would have no further involvement in the property, and he agreed to cover a portion of my legal fees. He didn't look at me when he signed. My mother cried outside in the hallway afterward. My father shook his head slowly at the floor. I understood their grief. They had watched 2 of their children sit on opposite sides of a table and sign legal documents. That is a specific kind of loss, and I didn't take it lightly. But I thought about something my grandmother used to say. She'd grown up without much, worked her whole life, saved carefully, and built something from nothing. She used to say, "What you protect is what you value." She said it about a lot of things, her health, her garden, her savings account. She meant it broadly. I protected what she left me. I think she would have understood. The condo is rented now, properly this time, with a real lease under my name through a legitimate property management company. The tenant renewed for another year. I've started putting the rental income into a separate account, earmarked for the maintenance and eventually for whatever comes next. My brother and I don't speak much. My parents and I talk on the phone, carefully like 2 people navigating a path that has some new terrain on it. It's not the same as before. I don't know if it will be. But I've stopped measuring my worth by how little trouble I cause, and that, more than the money, more than the condo, more than any of it, that is what I walked away with. People always want to know, was it worth it? I put $29,000 back in my pocket. I secured an asset my grandmother worked her entire life to leave me. I stopped a pattern that would have continued indefinitely if I'd looked away one more time. Yeah, it was worth it. There's a moment in mediation that I keep coming back to. My brother picked up the pen, and he just held it for a second, not long, maybe 3 seconds, and I watched his face do something complicated. He wasn't angry anymore. He was just tired, and I thought, this is what happens when a long pattern finally meets a hard boundary. Not drama, just exhaustion. I thought a lot about what actually made this whole thing work, and it wasn't luck. It wasn't even the lawyer, as good as she was. It was that I'd spent years doing a job that taught me to look at numbers until they told the truth. Every day I reconcile invoices. I find the line that doesn't match. I follow it until I understand why. That discipline, the habit of documenting, of not accepting a vague answer, of building a record before you need it, that's what saved me. Not as a strategy I invented in a crisis, but as something I had already been practicing for years without knowing I'd eventually need it this badly. My grandmother used to say that how you treat small things tells you everything about how you'll handle big ones. She kept receipts for groceries. She filed her taxes the first week of February every year without fail. She wrote her will by hand and had it witnessed properly and stored it with her lawyer. She was not a wealthy woman by most measures, but she managed what she had with such steadiness that it compounded over decades into something real, something she could leave behind. And when I needed to protect what she left, I found out that I had learned from her more than I realized. My brother had the same grandmother. He chose differently, and I don't say that to be cruel. I genuinely don't know what was happening inside his life that made this feel like a reasonable option. Desperation makes people do things they would have said were unthinkable 5 years earlier, but his desperation was not my responsibility to absorb at the cost of what was mine. That's a thing I had to learn slowly, and the learning was uncomfortable. Being the person who keeps the peace is something that gets praised so consistently in families that you can mistake it for a virtue. Sometimes it is. And sometimes it's just a long, slow way of telling yourself that your needs matter less than everyone else's. The civil claim forced me to stand behind my own rights in a formal, documented, witnessed way. There was no room for me to soften it, or reframe it, or apologize for it. The documents said what they said. I found that, strangely, clarifying. I'm not estranged from my family. We talk. It's careful for now, and maybe it always will be. But I'm not angry anymore either. Anger was useful for about 3 weeks when I needed it to get moving. After that, it would have just been weight. What I kept, aside from the condo and the back rent, was something harder to name. A kind of self-respect that comes specifically from having done the right thing, the hard way, without folding when it got uncomfortable. My grandmother worked 30 years to leave me something. The least I could do was be someone worth leaving it to.